Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another one of our student ministry lessons. This week is our second week of our canceled series where we're talking all about loving others. And last week we kicked things off by talking a little bit about this cancel culture that we are living in and how we need to love others who are different than us. And speaking of our cancel culture, I think every day we face opportunities to help others in some small ways. All of us are helpful and generous sometimes, but what about the times that we'd rather not be helpful? When we're too busy or annoyed or tired, or maybe we think someone else will help if we don't. Well, why does helping others, why does loving people who are in need matter to God? Well, every day we're surrounded by people who need help. And when we're in need, we're at our most vulnerable. But unfortunately, we don't always respond with compassion or care or concern when we see someone else in need. Instead, I think we often respond with impatience or discomfort, disgust, or maybe even suspicion or annoyance. Well, we can actually lead others to God by helping them when they're in need. In the Gospels, and just a reminder, those are the first four books of the New Testament that tell us stories of Jesus' life. We actually find examples of Jesus meeting the needs of the most vulnerable people around him. And Jesus' days, he was often interrupted by people's cries for help. And there was a time that a blind man named Bartimaeus was shouting at Jesus while he walked down the road. So we find this story in the Gospel of Mark in chapter 10. So we're going to start reading here in verse 46. It says, "Then they reached Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus was sitting beside the road. When Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, 'Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me.' 'Be quiet,' many of the people yelled at him, but he only shouted louder, 'Son of David, have mercy on me.' When Jesus heard him, he stopped and said, 'Tell him to come here.' So they called the blind man. 'Cheer up,' they said. 'Come on, he's calling you.' Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. 'What do you want me to do for you?' Jesus asked. 'My rabbi,' the blind man said, 'I want to see.' And Jesus said to him, 'Go, for your faith has healed you.' Instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. So Bartimaeus pleaded for help, but he was told to be quiet. The crowds just couldn't be bothered. To them, Bartimaeus was just another beggar. He was not worthy of their help or attention. And that probably sounds a little familiar, where someone was in need, but we didn't think they were really worthy of our time or our attention. We just ignored them, maybe because they were different or it would have been uncomfortable to help them. This crowd could have met Bartimaeus' needs by just helping him come to Jesus. They knew Jesus could heal him. All they had to do was help. And I think there are so many people that we know whose need is to know Jesus. Are we helping them come to Jesus? Or are we being just like the crowd and not being very helpful and just ignoring their needs? Because to Jesus, Bartimaeus was worthy of his time, his attention, and his help. And there's a similar story in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 8 where Jesus heals a woman who would not have been seen as someone who was worthy of Jesus' time and attention, especially because he was busy. But to Jesus, this woman was worthy of his time, his attention, and his help. He spoke to her, he called her daughter, and he met her needs with love. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we meeting people's needs? Are we helping them? Are we seeing people as worthy of our attention and our time, or are we just ignoring them? Are we just canceling them? Through his example and his teachings, Jesus consistently cared for the people who had been canceled, forgotten, and disrespected and ignored just because of their needs. And now he's challenging us to do the same, to love people who are in need. So what does God want us to do about it? Well, Jesus doesn't challenge us to only act concerned about others or to put on a show of meeting people's needs. Jesus doesn't only care about what we do, he cares about what's happening in our hearts and in our minds. So how do we do this? How do we practically meet the needs of people around us? Well, there are so many opportunities all around us because there are so many needs all around us. If we were paying attention, just like Jesus noticed the needs of Bartimaeus and the sick woman, what would it look like for you to notice a need and then respond in love? Maybe it's noticing a need with someone who is different than you at school or in your sport or activity. Maybe it's just with a sibling. Do you struggle to act with compassion and care when your sibling is in need? Or maybe it's with a friend or someone else in your family. Maybe it's someone you don't even know who is struggling. In Jesus' time, people were often canceled by society instead of helped. They were ignored, they were judged, and left to fend for themselves. And we still have that problem today, don't we? But if you want to love like Jesus loves, you have to love the people who are in need. And when you do, it's like you're doing it for Jesus himself.